It was a dark and stormy night. Not the kind of dark that comforts you. Not the kind of dark that settles you. Not the kind of rain that pitter-patters across your window, makes you seek the comfort from early childhood, reminds you of those summer nights when it would storm down, but the power would stay on. Not that kind of night at all. I was working, like I usually do, late at night. I always work late at night. Some people wake up at 5 a.m. because they like the comfort it brings, the serenity, the peace. But I don't like that. I think of it as useless. What's the point of waking up so early when you're tired? I'm always tired. Hard work does that to you. It's always the hard work. So I stay up late at night. It was about 9 p.m., maybe 10, maybe even 11, midnight maybe, sometime very late at night. The moon was at its peak, but the clouds were covering it. There was no light, except for the one lamp I had in my office. I don't like the overhead lighting. It stings my eyes, makes me go crazy, illuminates too much. There's already so much of the world that is way too visible, always on, always overstimulating. I don't like it. I like it to be calm. There was the knock at my door. I thought it strange. I thought to myself, I'd locked the door. How could anyone have come in? The cleaning crew, I don't have any. I don't believe in them. I believe in cleaning myself, doing the hard work myself, getting on my own hands and knees, not using any of those modern tools, using the old stuff, the good shit. I don't believe in not swearing either. What's the point of being free in this world if you can't say what you want to say? So, there was the knock. I said, come in. I always welcome danger, no matter how dangerous it seems. I can handle it. I've always handled it. At 35 years old, I've seen more danger than most people when they're on their deathbed, even when death is staring them straight in the face. The ultimate danger. She walked in. She was beautiful. I wanted to throw myself at her right away, right when she walked through my oak door. But that would be inappropriate, and I am nothing if not appropriate, except when I'm not. But this was not one of those times. Her hair was long, I could tell, but it was in a ponytail, very convenient, very safe. I asked if she needed to dry off. She said no. Then she said, do you want to know my name? But I said no, because I wasn't done observing her. So she was a little wet, water dripping off of her dress. It was black. A little black dress never goes out of style. Even people like me know that. People you may not expect to know things like that, but I do. I know lots of things that people don't expect me to know, because that's who I am, the person who knows. But they don't know who they know. I only know who knows, and who knows is me. The little black dress was not too form-fitting. I could tell that she liked to be comfortable, but not without sacrificing style. I said, what is your name? And she said, Scarlet. And I said, that's clearly a fake name. That's the color of your lipstick, not your actual name. Her lipstick was, in fact, scarlet, red, maybe crimson, maybe vermilion, maybe chartreuse. I can never remember which one of those is red and which is green. Like many people, I get confused, but not confused about the things that really matter. She had some mascara, not the voluminizing type, not the lengthening type, just the regular type. I could tell it was waterproof because there were no streaks down her eyes. If it weren't waterproof, there would be the streaks because it had been raining. Heavy, hard, dangerous rain, the type of rain that causes car crashes and train crashes and airplane crashes and kills lots of people that I need to then investigate. Well, not me specifically, but I always end up investigating it because there is always trouble afoot and danger and clues in the pieces that people just simply do not understand, like how I understand it. Me. She asked what my name was, and I said, you first. And she said, my name is Lola. And I said, that's another fake name. She said, I'll tell you mine when you tell me yours. And I said, my name's on the door. And she said, oh, sorry, I didn't see it. I said, why don't you look around? Why don't you take in your surroundings? That's why you're here, because you don't see what I see. She apologized, and I said, go back out and look at the door. And she said, but it's raining. And I said, there's a little overhead above the door. Did you not notice that either? And she said, no, I had not. And that's when I knew I was dealing with my most difficult client yet. This would be a hard case to crack, whatever it was. She went outside. I continued working on my notes, my extensive notes. A note about a case I had already solved, but I wanted to go over the missing pieces one last time to see if there was a different outcome. There was not. She came back in, and she said, your name is Johnny. And I said, yes, Johnny Breaker. What's it to ya? And she said, fine. My name is Donna. And I said, that's a little too close to Lola. Has the same ending. You should pick a different secret name the next time you're dishing out secret names. And she said, sorry, I just came up with it on the spot. And I said, that explains a lot. So I said, Donna, first of all, how did you get into my office? The door was locked. And she said, it was not locked. And I said, yes, it was. I remember locking it. And she said, then how did I happen to step into it through an unlocked door and into your office? And I said, I guess I'd forgotten to lock it. There's something you should know about me, Donna. I'm not perfect. I solve every case I get, but sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes it takes throwing an innocent man in jail to then find the real villain, the real criminal. And she said, there are no villains in this world, just criminals. And I said, that's why I said criminals right after villains, because I'd realized my mistake. I understand my mistakes. I know what's at stake. She just didn't understand. Not then, at least. I said, Donna, what brought you in here? Why did you walk through the soaking rain? Why did you not pick up an umbrella on the way here? It rains here all the time. That's what I like about this town. Never any sunlight. Only the clouds, so I can be comfortable in the darkness, secluded, discreet, isolated. She said, I don't have an umbrella. I don't believe in them. I believe in the rain and its healing powers. And I said, Donna, do not bring up that woohoo mishmash with me. I don't believe in it. Here in my office, Johnny Breaker's office, we keep it tight. We keep it concise. We keep it real. And she said, yes, Mr. Breaker. And I said, call me Johnny. You already walked through my unlocked door. No knocking. And then she said, I did knock when I walked into your office. And I said, yes, that's right. But you did not knock at the front door. Only the door of my specific office. And she said, why is this building even like this? There's a little hallway that leads to your door, and then another door. And I said, the other door is the bathroom. Do you really think I would have an office without a bathroom? That is ridiculous. I am too successful of a detective to not have a bathroom with an office. I will not be going across the street to the fast food restaurant. And she said, what fast food restaurant? And I said, I'm not saying their name. They're not paying me to say their name. I can't be complicit. I can't have a conflict of interest. There might be a crime there any time now. Any time. She said, calm down. I said, I never calm down about justice. Never, ever. Justice is in my blood. My father was a detective. She said, I don't care about your backstory. I told her, I'm going to tell it to you anyways. He was a detective. He died in the line of duty. He was 35 years old. I was 6. I still remember walking in, and there was blood all over the place. And she said, he was murdered in your home? And I said, no. I had walked into the site where the crime had taken place, where he was investigating. And she said, why would you go there? And I said, because I had to. I felt it in my soul. And then she said, wow, you're the one getting woohoo now, talking about souls. And I said, don't talk down to me. This is about my father, who was murdered. How dare you? She apologized. I said, you're doing an awful lot of apologizing. You don't seem very strong. You don't seem very solid in yourself. And she said, I know when I'm wrong too. And that's when I realized I could trust her, Donna. I said, what's your last name? And she said, tell me more about your father. I said, no, you get that information later when I can trust you even more. She said, what's the difference between trust and more trust? Then I said, what's the difference between infinity and infinity times 2? She didn't answer. In her mind, I knew she said touche. I said, Donna, what brings you here? And she said, my brother, he's been murdered. I said, aren't they all? They all get murdered. Everyone. Whether it's by natural forces or unnatural, someone with a gun, someone with a knife, everyone ends up on their deathbed. Everyone ends up in that other place beyond our world. It's a shame. Take every breath knowing that the next one could be your last. I was getting grim in the moment. I always get grim when talking about death. It might be my job, but I am still human after all. I might be a bit more than human, a bit smarter than the average person, a bit more detective-y than the average person. I could solve any case that comes my way. But I still cry. Not often. Sometimes. On nights opposite this. On nights when there is no rain. There is no thunder. There is just me and my thoughts and nothing to distract me from them. No noises. Might be thinking, Johnny, get a radio. But I don't want to. I don't believe in radios. The feds could tap them, and they could be listening into me. You might be thinking, Johnny, don't you work with the feds? No. I work for myself. And only myself. That's how I get the highest success rate. I once worked for the police force as a detective. That was my first rookie job, and I was just that, a rookie. I didn't know the politics. I didn't know the corporate jargon and all the different dynamics of everything. They treated me like a fool. I knew I was not a fool. When I solved my first case, which was my first case, they congratulated me. There was a party. They had cake. They had champagne. And I said, why are you drinking on the job? And they said, we're celebrating. I said, that's inappropriate. It's unprofessional. Someone could call in at any moment, say that their brother had been murdered, their sister, their mother, their father, their sibling, their parent, their cousin, their friend, their anything. Anyone could get murdered at any time. They said the office is closed, and I said 911 is never closed. We are never closed. We are always on duty. We serve a duty to the people. I knew I wasn't supposed to be with them. After that speech, they were eating their cake, drinking their champagne. They didn't smile. When they looked at me, their smile faded away after they had been joking around with one of their coworkers they liked more than me. I never liked any of them. They didn't understand me. They would never understand me. They knew nothing about me. I never told them anything about me. Why would I? They were cracks. They were skeezers. They were slimy. They were sleazy. They wouldn't care about justice even if it hit them in the face and threatened one of their loved ones. They would never care about justice. Ever. I said, Donna, tell me more. Your brother was murdered. What happened? She said, well, can I take a seat first? And I said, sure. I only have 2 other seats in my office. Just my chair and the 2 seats. Because that's all you need. 2 people to inform you about the case. Anyone else is superfluous. Completely superfluous. They don't know anything. It's only the first 2 people. That's all I need the information from. Anyone else, I could seek them out myself. Interview them in their home, their place of work, anywhere. I can go anywhere I want. I may work on my own, but everyone trusts me. I have that demeanor. If I tell them I'm with the feds, they believe me, even though that's a lie. I will lie if it gets me closer to the truth and to justice. She said I came home, me and my brother. We share a place. We had both gone through a divorce, and we needed someone to live with us. We needed to split the rent. Times are hard now. And I said, yes, go on. I know that times are hard. God knows the rent to my office has gone up astronomically since I first got it 10 years ago. Stupid capitalism of it all. That's the one thing I don't respect the most. Or that, in other words, I respect the least. That's the ultimate killer. It's the ultimate injustice of this world. She told me they got a place together, a place to rent. Between them, the rent was manageable. They still kept their jobs, and they loved each other dearly. They had been very close, only 2 years apart. They were boy and girl, but they were inseparable. She told me all of this, and I was waiting for her to get to the juicy details. I almost wanted to get it out of her right away. What was the murder weapon? How did you find him? How much blood was there? What was the autopsy report? What have the police said to you? Those useless pigs. What have they said? But I let her tell her story. You never know what someone is going to say. That's a vital piece of information. She said, even remembering it, it's hard. The story, how it all wraps together. But I have yet to figure it out. But I know that I'm close. She said the times were rough. Her brother was becoming more agitated by the day. It had been a few months. They had moved in together. And he was just irritable, drowsy, not getting enough sleep. She said he would have night terrors. He'd wake up screaming, just like when they were kids. I started to become a little soft. I may have a heart of steel, but it's still a heart nevertheless. It's hard for me to not feel for my clients, want to help them with only my heart and not my brain. But I know that the heart is unreliable. You must rely on your brain, your rationality, your judgment, your intelligence. Emotions, they get in the way. I've never had my emotions successfully solve a case. It has only been my brain. So I asked her, continue, keep going. She told me about his work. He was being bullied by his boss and his other coworkers. I could relate to the bullying. I was able to stand up against it when I was a rookie, but not everyone can stand up against it. Not everyone has the steel, the spine to stand up for what is right. Sometimes they just take it. They don't know what else to do. I asked her, was he bullied when he was a child? She said, yes, I knew it. It's always a pattern. With all of these clients, there's always a pattern of behavior, of choices, of history. History always repeats itself because people never learn from their lessons. I asked her, keep going, tell me more. She said he had been being bullied by his boss. They would ridicule him, say he wasn't doing any work, good work, even though he was doing good work. Everyone else liked him. All his clients liked him. It may have been important, I was thinking. Maybe not. People get bullied, people get picked on, people get ridiculed. That doesn't necessarily mean they're killers, but it might fit the profile. Sometimes a killer is just who you expect. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes there's a twist. Sometimes there's a twist on a twist. Sometimes a mystery is obvious and you put them behind bars. Sometimes they never admit to it, but you just have to trust your judgment that you were right, and you have to trust the jury as well. The system isn't perfect, but it does what it can. So he was being bullied, I said. Keep going. Tell me more. She said he was getting very depressed, almost about to harm himself. I said, did he? She said, no, this was a murder. It was so obviously murder. I said, tell me about it. Tell me more. What happened? You're not telling me all of the details. Donna continued on. She said she got home from work one day. Usually he always got home first, but he wasn't there. She assumed that maybe he was out with friends. I asked, did he have any friends? She said no. He was starting to make new friends because after the divorce, all of his wife's friends were his friends, but they just sided with her. I said, typical. That's what always happens. Regardless of the gender, the friends always stick with the person they knew first. They never go with the spouse who gets divorced. She said, yes, I know this because that's what happened with my friends too. I asked, do you have any friends? And she said, no. I said, you should get some. And then I said, don't think I'm going to be your friend. No matter how long this case goes on, 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, a year, I will never be your friend. I do not let emotions get in the way of my work. And she said, how about you can be my lover? And I said, hit the brakes, girl. I don't play like that. She laughed. It was clearly a test. Well, not really a test. More of a joke. I said, you like toying with people? She said, sorry. It's all I can do after my brother was gone. We always used to pick on each other playfully. Now I have no one to do it with. And I said, well, leave it at the door when you walk in. The unlocked door. She said, will it keep being unlocked? And I said, I just might give you a key if you earn it. She then told me that she tried to file a missing persons report. I said, you can't do that for 48 hours. And she said, I did it 5 hours after I came home. Amateurs. They are all amateurs. They always follow their heart and not the law. The feds might be corrupt, but they do have their rules, and they won't follow you, and they won't listen to you if you don't play by them. I said, they told you have to wait longer, and they said yes. But I told them he isn't coming back. If he's gone, then he's gone. I said, did you try calling him? And she said, yes. I called him. I texted him. I left voicemail after voicemail. I tried tracking him, but it was off. I said, is he usually on? She said, yes. Usually his tracking is on. I said, that is strange. Strange indeed. Do you think someone hacked into his phone? She said, I don't know. And I said, do you still have the phone? And she said, the police have it. And I said, I might just have to get in on that. We'll see what the police say. But I can always crack them if I need to. So what'd you do next? I said. She said I waited the 43 hours, and then I called the police again, and they started their investigation. I said, how many times do you cry? 20, she said. I cried 20 times. Did you track it? Did you write it down? Mark it on the walls in lines and brackets like you were held prisoner by your own tears? She said yes, as a matter of fact. I did. Then it was my turn to chuckle. She was funny little Donna. I knew that working with her wouldn't be as boring as some of my other clients who didn't exactly know how to maintain a conversation. They wanted the rules and the facts, even when I couldn't give it to them right away, but they still pressed on. But not Donna. She would be more cooperative, as I assumed, and she did. So I asked her, when did you find the body? She said, the police never did. I had to call them again. That's when she started her monologue, her dramatic monologue. It might as well have been a Shakespearean soliloquy. I memorized it. It's not always hard for me to memorize things, especially things that stab me in the heart. Your brain might be the ones that memorizes words and facts and information, but the heart lets it sink in. She said, as she began, as she would recount a harrowing story indeed. I got a tip, not a tip, but a feeling. I knew that he and his buddies, his fake buddies at work, would sometimes go to this bar. A bar that was sleazy and skeezy, a dive bar, a place that even I wouldn't walk in, no sensible person would, a place where the bathrooms would be disgusting and you would have to squat over the toilet like a Neanderthal. I went over there. I asked the barkeep, have you seen my brother? And I showed a picture of him. He said, well, maybe last week. There's lots of people that come in here. And I said, his place of work is right down the street. Did he come in? He said, yes. I asked him, what was he like? What was your impression of him? The bartender said, he was weak. He had no spine. All of his coworkers would bully him, call him mean names. They would say the worst things, and he would just laugh it off, but I knew it stung him. Stung him right in his little big heart. Ooh, he did not have what it takes to be in the business. I know he did not. He never would have. He would never make it in that world. He might as well just have quit that job and start going into something else, something more mundane, like someone who gives tickets in traffic or the parking meters. Yes, that. Someone who collects the coins at the parking meters. That would be a good fit for him. Don't you dare talk bad about my brother. I loved him. He was a good man. Maybe he couldn't always stand up for himself, but he was a good man. Now you tell me what happened to him. Well, the last time I saw him was a strange day indeed. It was a dark day, a stormy day. It was pouring down. It was only 5 p.m. Usually the sun would still be up. It was blocked out by all the clouds. As she was telling me this, me, Johnny Breaker, I knew that's when something bad would have happened. It always happens on dark days like that. Good for me, but bad for everyone else. So, I saw him go into the bathroom, had to take a piss, take a leak. As you know, the beer runs right through you. He doesn't drink beer. My brother doesn't drink beer. He gets seltzers or just a soda. He doesn't drink beer. He says it tastes like piss. Why would he order a beer? Well, the guys got it for him. They were practically funneling it into him. Oh, it was a crazy scene. I thought they were going to pull out a keg or a beer funnel and make him do something like how he was in college. Friggin' do a shoey or something like that. I don't know, lady. Why are you pestering me like this? Because he's dead. My brother is dead. So that's why I haven't seen him come in here. Well, good for him as well. He was drinking so much I thought I was going to be sick. That's why I thought he'd go to the bathroom go throw up. You said you thought he went to the bathroom to take a piss. Well, it could have been both. Maybe he was doing it at the same time. I don't know. What's it to you? I said, my brother is dead. He kept washing the glasses in that fashionable way, as if he was being recorded. 3 fingers in, a towel. I wanted to ask him, why do you not have a dishwasher? Why are you washing it by hand? It seems so weird to me. I almost asked him, but I knew it wouldn't be worth my while. So instead I kept pressing him. This man knew something. Yes, Johnny Breaker thought, he did know something. Where is my brother? Well, I don't know. How am I supposed to know? Did he ever come out from the bathroom? Yes, he did, but then... I think my memory is a little faded. On days like this in the afternoon, they got me working this shift, but how you make a real living as a bartender is the tips. But as you can see from that jar over there, I'm not getting many tips. People don't like to tip on card either. Ugh, stingy. People are stingy these days. I pulled out a 20 and flashed it to him. Is this going to do it for you? Well, maybe a peck on the cheek as well. I slapped the 20 down on the table. This is all you're going to get. Well, all right, yes, I saw he came out from the bathroom looking a little sickly, wobbling a little bit. I almost thought to cut him off, but his coworkers wanted to get him one last beer. I thought they were going to make him shotgun it. Thankfully, they did not, though. Ooh, he definitely would have puked by then. And I didn't want him puking up all over my floors. I didn't have to clean it up, and it would be such a mess. Now I have that sawdust stuff you put on it to make it solid. Oh, it's a mess. I said, what happened to my brother? He came out of the bathroom. Yes, he came out of the bathroom, and they fed him the one last beer, made him just chug the entire thing from the bottle, and then, well, I think he went outside. They all went outside. That was, I guess, 3 days ago. When do your trash people come? Well, they come once a week. Why do you ask? I ripped the 20 off the table. Skeezers, sexist pigs like that should not take money from people who are trying to find their brother. I ran outside through the back door. Hey, you can't go back there. That's private business. My brother went out there. I'm going to go out there, I yelled. I rushed out the back. I found the dumpster. I lifted it, and I screamed. I screamed until a couple other patrons ran outside, until the bartender ran outside. Whoa, what's that? There's a dead body in there. I screamed. I wouldn't stop screaming. I couldn't stop screaming. That was him. His body had been decaying, the coroner thought, for at least 3 days. Right on the money. I called the police and they showed up. Took them just a little too long, in my opinion, to show up. They pulled his body out of the dumpster. The autopsy report. I can't even. Miss Donna, I know this is a really tough time for you, but I have to know what else happened. What did you find out? Well, you're not the only one with the sleuthing abilities. I may not be able to solve this case, but I got some information. She pulled her purse out. It's a pretty big purse. Just like a purse you could put a manila envelope in, which is what she pulled out of her purse. She took out some documents. I copied these from the coroner's report and the autopsy. Seems very strange to me. I flipped through it. Yes, there was lots of information with there. The blood alcohol content was off the charts, way above 0.08, 3 times that. He had definitely been drinking a lot of beer, and judging from his height and weight, he wasn't exactly a lightweight, but even for them, that would have gotten him completely drunk. No one like that would ever see a murder coming, and they surely wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Looking even more, I found the most important part. He had scratches. He had other wounds, not just the kind of roughhousing wounds. No, these people weren't just punching him. They weren't just scratching at him. They weren't kicking all over. No, there were stab wounds. This was someone who had it out for him. This was no ordinary murder. I asked her, do you think this is an ordinary murder? And she said, no, I don't think this is an ordinary murder. I think he was fully murdered in a mysterious way, a crazy way. But who would have it out for him? I looked through the rest of the pages. I asked her, you only have pages 1 through 3 and 5 through 7. There's a page missing, the 4th page. Where is this page? She snatched the papers out of my hands and she said, wow, you're good, Mr. Johnny Breaker. I didn't even notice there was a page missing. I asked her, did you miss a page? She said, no. I combed through those pages with secure precision. I would have known if I had accidentally not copied one of the pages. So, I said, seems like there is a scandal afoot. Tell me, what else do you know? What have the cops been doing? And she said, well, it's been about 2 weeks since the end of their investigation. They wanted to close it out, but I begged them not to. I said, use your tears, didn't you? And she said, of course. I have to make sexism work for me. How else am I going to make them care about my brother who was murdered? I said, good point. Just like me, you have to use all the resources that are afforded to you, even the ones that might be a little unethical, even the ones that might constitute lying, but that doesn't matter. It's very important that we try to get the truth, no matter how scandalous it might seem, no matter how bad it might make us look, even no matter how small or big the actions are. We have to find out what happened to our loved ones. And she said, that's why I hired you. I looked you up in the yellow pages, and I knew from your name alone that you would be the person I needed. I asked her, first of all, why did you not just search me up on the internet? I didn't know people used phone books anymore. Second of all, if my first and last name is in the yellow pages, and why did you forget my last name? And she said, sometimes I forget. And I said, well, I'm going to have to keep an eye out for that, because if you're forgetful, then I'm going to have to make you remember the facts, because we might be missing something. And she said, Johnny, I can assure you, when it comes to my brother, there is nothing missing. I asked her, go on, continue with the story. What have the cops been doing? And she said, well, they did the autopsy report. They did some investigation around the coworkers and his place of work and the bar. They interviewed a couple people, even the bartender, and no one's saying anything. And I said, I'm not surprised that no one's saying anything. People rarely talk. Then I looked her straight in the eyes, as I had been doing this whole time, but I looked at her even more intently, with eyes wide open, scarily open. Do you think it was one of his coworkers that murdered him? She said, no, I don't think it was one of them. I think they were bullies, but I don't think they were murderers. I said, well, they could easily fit the profile. She said, I'm not sure about that. I talked to them too, and they were so distraught. It was strange. They didn't even like him, but they still threw a little company party for him. It was stupid in my opinion. They invited me, said he did good work. I could tell her nerves were getting the best of her. She was tensing up in a way that held fury, held scorn. I said, you didn't just eat the cake and drink the champagne. She said, how'd you know there was champagne and cake? I said, there's always champagne and cake at one of those nonsense, superficial, vapid parties. What did you do? She said, I screamed at them. I told them, how could you do this? You all hated him. You all bullied him. You all ridiculed him. He would come home crying. He said he needed to find a new job, but he couldn't find anywhere else to work. Didn't even want to try. He knew how bad the market was, and you all ridiculed him. I don't believe he killed himself. I believe someone killed him, and I don't believe it was any of you, but I do believe that actions have consequences, and that life has a chain of events, and that by you guys ridiculing and bullying him, that directly led to his death. I said, how could you praise him for doing good work when you all constantly yelled at him for doing poor work, when you all lied to him about doing poor work? I just exploded. The security guards officially took me out. Really threw me out of the building. It was so disgraceful. I still have the scab healing on my knee. Then she lifted up her knee and lifted up the little black dress that came luckily just above her knee, so she didn't need to lift it up much more. And she showed me the little scar and the scab from when they threw her out of the building. I said, that should have healed by now. And she said, I would need more time to heal this wound. And in my mind, I said, touche. So, you said there's security guards. That means there's security cameras. Let's start with this case. I took out my notepad. But first you should know, I have very, very high fees. But they're worth it. And I don't live too luxuriously, except for my sports car and my big house in the city and my lake house. But I need all those things to survive. And she said, don't worry. I was his benefactor from the life insurance policy from his work. Those fucking bastards may have killed him, but at least I got the money from it. She took out a big wad of cash and slapped on the table. I said, are you going to rip this from my hands? And she said, no, I respect you, unlike that bartender. There's $5,000 cash. How much does that get me? And I said, gets you 2 weeks. Let's see what we can make happen. But let's start with the basics. They have security guards, which means they have security cameras. Did the police go over the footage? She said no. I said, of course they didn't. They never, ever do. Tell me, Donna, what about the bar? Do they have security cameras? And she said, why, yes, they do. I remember looking for them after I found his dead body, seeing if there would be any evidence. I even pointed them out to the police. They combed through the footage, but mysteriously, there was no footage for that day at that specific time. It had been wiped. Donna, I said, do you think someone in the police force had it out for him and destroyed the evidence? And she said, yes, I do, because one of those police officers used to be his friend. Now, at that moment, I was shocked. I knew this would be the biggest case that I would ever solve and settle in my entire detective career, and I had been in the field for a long time. Back in school, I solved the case of the mysterious murder of the rats that we kept as pets in one of the classrooms. Ooh, it was an animal rights activist. Usually I respect people like that, but this was the PETA type. His name was Tyler. He was radical. Oh, if he hadn't gone to jail due to that, then who knows who else he would have hurt. Probably people at that point. He didn't believe in caging animals. He didn't believe in caging them as pets or even having any animal as a pet, even the run-of-the-mill dog or cat. I knew it would be him. We had the same class together, and I always saw him looking at those rats longingly, yearningly. He even switched spots at the back of the classroom so he could look at them more. I knew he had done it. I thought it was strange because he had an animal rights activist pin on his backpack. 3 of them, actually. Such obvious. It was clear that he wasn't trying to be coy about it, not trying to hide it. It was almost as if he wanted to go to jail. Well, he didn't go to jail right away. After that, he went to a psych facility and got some help. But after he got out, he assaulted someone in school. Because of course he did. Because when you don't catch the person and put them in for as long as they need, even in a place as necessary as a mental health facility, sometimes people slip through the cracks. They fake their way out of there. They say, I'm fine, I'm calm now, I've dealt with my anger, I've dealt with my radical ideology that harms people. But they never have. Not really. He got out. He assaulted a student who was talking about his dog too. It was sad. It was very sad. But by then, he was put into a junior facility for kids who need a lot of extra help. I knew he had done it, but I needed to prove it. That was easy. I simply recorded him admitting to it. I knew he had done it. I knew if I riled him up, he would admit to it at some point. The conversation only lasted 3 minutes. I turned him into the police right away, not even the principal or the teachers at first. I knew this needed to go straight to the cops. They didn't believe me. They never believed me. If only I'd taken video too as well, but it was only the audio. So then I had to show my teacher, and then the principal, and then they vouched for the case. And that's when I knew you can never trust adults, because sometimes they only trust adults, even when they have a very capable teenager telling them exactly what's going on with exactly precise evidence. Sometimes I don't even trust myself, because I know sometimes I am illusion to reality because of my own experience. It's sad, really, that an adult detective who has over 20 years, maybe even more, I've lost count over the years, someone like that could even lose track of himself, but it happens. You have to be aware. You have to be extra aware, extra meticulously self-aware to survive in this business. My dad, though, he was very proud of me, or at least he would have been if he were still alive. I knew in that place beyond the physical world he would be proud of me. I tried laying a candle. Sometimes I get into the superstition, sometimes I don't. Sometimes you have to believe your gut. I lit a candle and said, "Thank you, Dad. Thank you for leading me to this case." Then I blew out the candle and the smoke. I swear the smoke billowed for just a little bit longer than a regular candle wick should have. And I knew he was with me. Sometimes I feel his spirit, sometimes I don't. It just depends. Sometimes I flip-flop, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm standard. Sometimes I'm cynical. Sometimes I'm on the straight and narrow. Sometimes I'm not. It just depends on the day. But I always get the work done. So I asked her, tell me more about this friend that he knew from high school. Well, she told me, the friend's name is Colby. and he is a bad man. A rotted, corrupt cop. Has the most traffic violations and ticket citations out of all of them there. He pulled me over once, a couple years ago. I was doing 55 and a 50. I couldn't even believe he was pulling me over. I recognized him, and he recognized me too. He was just terrible. I could tell from the moment. I was careful. I did exactly what he told me to. Even then, he still wanted me to get out of the car. So I did, and he investigated the car. Even after I gave him my license, my insurance, my registration, he ran my plates, and my record is clean. You can look at it yourself if you want to, with whatever cyber ways you have of doing it. And I said, we don't use the word cyber anymore. That's old school, but yes, I can look up things on the internet about people and use resources that are only available to me and the most elite of detectives. But I trust you. I trust you have a clean record. But I still noted to myself mentally that I would check her record because you can never trust someone too much. So I said, continue. And she said, I knew he wanted to do something else, but he had nothing on me. He still issued me a ticket. And what's worse, I went to court to contest it. I had the next day off, so I thought, why not? And he actually showed up. I was shocked by that. We all know that cops rarely ever show up to their ticket violations, especially for something mundane as a speeding ticket going over 5 and a 50. That doesn't make any sense. And when I got there, Donna continued, and I saw his face, he didn't even scowl at me. He wasn't mad. He was smiling like a Cheshire cat because he knew he had won. I still testified for myself, and that's when I realized he had forgotten to sign the ticket. Thank God. I thank my lucky stars that I pointed that out. I feel so grateful for that. That's when his face, his smile completely dropped. That's when he scowled. That's when he had a frown because he knew he had been bested. He knew someone who thinks of himself as the smartest in the bunch, even though he is actually the dumbest. He knew he had made a mistake. The judge rolled her eyes. She said this had happened before. I thought it was so strange that even though this has happened before, he was still in disbelief that someone had caught him. She told me afterwards it had happened 5 times before, the most she had seen from any other cop. She said it was such a basic thing to sign the ticket, but this cop, Mr. Colby, still sometimes forgot to do it. She said it was 5 times in 1 year. She said she wanted to reprimand him in some way, but she knew she couldn't. So she let me off. She completely dismissed the ticket, but I never drove on that road ever again. Every time I see a cop car in that area, I wince because I think it might be him, because I have a feeling that he memorized my license plate, even though I have since gotten it changed. Somehow I think he knows. He'll recognize my car, even though it's a common car in a common color. He'll recognize it, and he'll pull me over, and he might do something worse this time. I said, Donna, I think you're the best client I've ever had, the best client I will ever have. I want to work on this case with you, but first I need to know, do I have your ultimate trust? Will you answer every question I ask of you with complete sincerity, with complete fullness? I trust you will not give me yes or no answers. I need to know every single detail about everything. And she said, yes, Johnny Breaker, I will work with you. And I said, well then, Donna, it seems like we are going to solve this case.